Hello, welcome back to another part of this nutritional module of trying to conceive after loss. I hope you're all well. Now, we've talked a little bit about the why when it comes to looking at nutrition to optimize fertility, and now we're going to talk a little bit more in practical terms about the how. Now, first of all, everyone thinks that they have a well-balanced diet, but I'm afraid this really is a myth. And in fact, there was a survey that took place in 2014, and it found that roughly only 1/3 of UK adults are actually achieving their 5 portions of fruit and veg a day, which are recommended by the government. Now, as a nutritional therapist, I think 5 really should be the minimum that we're looking at. You know, in an ideal world, and it might not be possible to do this every day, but we want to aim closer to between 7 and 10 portions of fruit and veg a day. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. But why is this important? It's because our cells are affected by everything that we come into contact. That includes the air we breathe, the things that we put on our skin, but also very much the food that we eat. And these factors are going to influence both egg and sperm development. Now, the thing is, when we begin to make some changes, we can actually see some results in our symptoms quite quickly, particularly when it comes to things like anxiety and low mood. So it really is worth taking a little bit of time out to think about the way you eat now, and use this presentation as an opportunity to think where you can make some differences and perhaps where you should be concentrating your efforts. It's not about doing everything at once. Let's take one thing at a time. Now, when it comes to fertility, and in fact, when it comes to health in general, the Mediterranean diet comes out top time and time again, particularly for fertility. And this is the case for both natural and IVF conceptions. Now, what does this Mediterranean diet look like? Well, I really like this diagram that we've got here, and fundamental to the Mediterranean diet, and in that bottom row, you'll see actually that we're not looking at food, but we're looking at other important connections, connecting with your loved ones, your family over the dinner table, trying to have an active lifestyle, exercising. General well-being is such an important part of a healthy lifestyle. And to be honest, you could be eating the best diet in the world, but if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not looking after your emotional well-being, if you're not getting enough sleep, for example, then the rest of it is not going to be enough to really, really move that needle. Now, the next stage up, we're looking at plant-based foods. And when I'm thinking about a Mediterranean diet, I very much consider it to be a plant-based diet. So in this section of the triangle, we've got lots of colourful fruit and vegetables, and we want as much variety as possible. Now, these are going to be rich in vitamins, in minerals, in antioxidants, and these are going to help fight free radical damage, which can cause chromosomal abnormalities, for example. We've also got in this section the plant-based proteins. So these might be things like pulses, for example. So these are really important, and we want to ensure that we're not only exclusively eating protein that comes from animal sources. We really want to focus in on our lentils, our beans, our legumes where we can. Another area in this plant-based phase of the diet is thinking about healthy fats. Now, these are absolutely essential to good health. And what we really have to do is try and run away from the fat-fearing messages of the 1980s and 90s. We've got to remember that fat is one of the primary ingredients and composition parts of the brain. Our brain is predominantly made of fat. It's a major source of energy. It keeps our cell membranes supple. And if we're not eating beneficial fats in the forms of nuts, seeds, avocados, olive oil, then we're not going to be giving our body the raw materials that we need. Now, a quick word about olive oil. It's brilliant. It's really anti-inflammatory, and you can have up to 4 tablespoons a day. So it really is something worth trying to include in your cooking and in, drizzling onto salads as well. Just make sure that if you're cooking with it, it doesn't reach that smoking point. So you don't heat it so much that you've got billows of smoke, because that can turn it rancid. It can oxidize the olive oil. Now, one step up from our plant-based foods, we've got fish. Now, fish are also a lovely source of protein, and they're going to give us a really nice supply of zinc, of iodine. These nutrients are so important for a healthy thyroid and also for healthy fertility. So if you can eat fish and if you enjoy fish, do try to include it when you can. Above that, we've got other forms of protein. We've got our white meats, we've got our eggs, we've got dairy, which, if you're somebody who can tolerate dairy, that's, again, it's a lovely form of both protein and beneficial fats. So you want to include those there. And then above that, we've got our red meats. And the idea is that we're really only having our red meats maybe once or twice a week. We don't need to have them every single day. The exception for that would be, for example, if you're somebody who has very low iron levels, which you can find if you get a full blood count from your doctor, for example, then you may need to have a little bit more iron in the form of red meats, because that's one of the easiest ways for us to absorb our iron. Now, also at the top of this triangle, we've got our sweets. Nothing here is banned. There is no food that is entirely off limits. It's all about having things in moderation. So if you enjoy sweets at the end of a meal, for example, that's fine. Try not to have it every single day. And what I would say, it tends to be better to actually have those sweet foods at the end of a meal rather than in isolation, because that way the protein that we've had during the meal will balance and buffer the effects of the sugar in those sweeter foods. So if we break that down, we're getting some really key macronutrients here. We're getting the colourful fruit and vegetables, and we want to aim for lots of variety there. And they're going to give us vitamins, minerals, antioxidants to help this free radical damage. We're getting protein, which is essential for hormones for the baby. It's essential for building and repair of cells. Our carbohydrates are going to be really important to give us fiber to support healthy digestion. They're going to help to keep our blood sugar levels stable. And this is really important for hormonal balance, particularly in conditions like PCOS. And we're getting our healthy fats to keep our cell membranes supple, as I mentioned. These are the building blocks of a lot of our steroid hormones, which are actually made from cholesterol, a type of fat, things like estrogen, progesterone, for example. They're also anti-inflammatory, and so that's really important as well. So this is roughly the approach that we want to take. And if we can do this, what we're doing is we're packing in lots and lots of nutrient-dense foods into our diet. Now you'll see that wine sits outside the triangle. I'm not saying avoid wine in entirety or alcohol in entirety. We know that it's not great for fertility, but sometimes it can be a really helpful de-stressor. So what I tend to say is, having it maybe once a week, sharing a bottle of wine with friends over a delicious meal, go for it, enjoy it, just don't do it every day. And my advice is, if you're going to have wine and you're only going to have it once a week or even less, ideally, go for the best quality wine that you can possibly get and really, really enjoy it. And then, of course, water is also outside this triangle. And this is something that is absolutely crucial. Hydration levels are so important for general health and well-being. So if we're thinking about hydration, what we're thinking about is lubricating our joints. We're wanting to lubricate the vaginal fluid. We're wanting to increase semen volume. And also it's really important, of course, for the detoxification and removal of toxins. Now, when we're thinking about hydration, we want to ensure that we're not getting into a dehydrated state. And the way that we can check that is really as simply as looking at your urine. So it should be a very pale color and it shouldn't have a strong smell. If it's a darker colour, if it does smell, then you really need to be drinking a little bit more water. And I would be aiming for roughly 8 glasses a day. Now, going back to the fruit and veg, one of the things to really think about is diversity. Each different colour brings with it different micronutrients, different vitamins, different minerals. And an approach that I like to take is to eat the rainbow. So by the end of each and every day, you want to think, have I managed to have at least one example, or ideally two, of each different colour of fruit and vegetables? Okay, so we want to try and get some white, some yellow, some red, some purple and some green in there, because each of them are going to bring different properties. So if we're thinking about orange foods, for example, they tend to be rich in beta carotene. Beta carotene is brilliant for both male and female fertility, particularly to support progesterone levels for women. Lycopene is found in red foods, particularly, for example, tomatoes and watermelon. It's really fantastic for sperm health. If we're talking about the purple foods, we're thinking about anthocyanins, which are a really potent antioxidant that protect our cells from oxidative stress, which can go on to cause DNA damage and ultimately chromosomal abnormalities. Green foods are rich in folate, which we know is important for fertility, and in magnesium. And white foods tend to be quite antimicrobial, so they can help support our immune function. Now, these micronutrients are working in concert. It's so much better to take them in foods rather than relying on a supplement. And this is the best way to ensure that we're really getting that broad base of micronutrients that we need: vitamins A, B, C, folate, magnesium, zinc, selenium, all of which are absolutely vital for fertility. And I would say, don't be afraid of frozen fruit and veg. They can be more affordable and they're super, super convenient. I often have frozen vegetables like spinach and peas in my freezer. And very often I also have some frozen berries, so that I've always got something on hand if I need it. So what does this look like in practice? Well, think about your plates of food, particularly lunch and supper. Ideally, we want half of our plate to be full of veg. And ideally, you want to include some leafy greens in there to get the folate in and to get the magnesium in. You want 1/4 of your plate to be full of protein. And an easy rule of thumb is, if you take your palm or your hand, you want roughly a palm-sized amount of protein. Now, this amount of protein is going to keep you full for longer, so it's going to sustain you until the next meal time. And that's, as I said before, it's going to give you these building blocks for cellular repair. And then the other 1/4 of the plate is where we have our traditional carbs, what we think about as, for example, our root vegetables are sweet potatoes, squash, potatoes, carrots, parsnips, for example, and also our whole grains. So that's what you want to have there. Now, these plate proportions might be slightly different from what you are used to. That's fine. What we're trying to do is crowd out of the plate the less nutrient dense foods and replace them with more nutrient dense foods. So, for example, an easy swap would be, rather than the white carbs, go for brown carbs to fit into that whole grain section of the plate. So rather than white rice, go for brown rice. Rather than white bread, go for brown bread. And the same would apply for pasta as well. Now, what I've done is I've put together some weekly challenges for you just to help you on your way. So rather than trying to do all of this stuff at once, I'm going to give you one focus point for each week. And that way, what I'd like you to do, and I'm really hoping you're going to be able to cement some really good habits rather than trying to do too many things at once and sort of, not managing to do any of them properly. So you'll see that you have got a weekly challenge handout. Have a look at that, and hopefully that will help you on your way. Now, I really hope that's been useful. These are just some broad foundations that, to be honest, are useful for everybody, regardless of your current health picture, your health background, your, any conditions that you've got. Eating in this way is really, really going to be beneficial for you, but you've got to take it one step at a time. And don't try and overwhelm yourself. Don't beat yourself up if you don't manage to do it all in one go. Every step you take, every meal you take, is going to take you one step closer to where you want to be. I hope that helps, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye bye.